What's good, everyone? Matt here from UK Nets Fans, and I'm joined as ever by Aidan and Cammy Anderson for another episode of BK to UK, the British Brooklyn Nets podcast. We'll be recapping games against the Clippers, Kings, Magic and Mavs, as well as reveling in that West Coast road trip, more All-Star chat, some contract moves, and a bit about Spencer Dinwiddie's future. Make sure you're following us on Twitter and Instagram at UK Nets Fans, the pod itself on Twitter at BK to UK Pod, and check us out on YouTube where you can watch back all of our episodes. But with that out of the way, gentlemen, we had an incredible start to the week as the first time in NBA history, an Eastern Conference team went over to the West, swept it, came back home again. What were your guys' overarching thoughts about that West Coast trip?
I mean, it's perfection. I don't think there's another word that you can really use to describe it. When you win all 6 games on the road, especially in some really good teams, yeah, as I say, it's perfection. Couldn't have asked for any better, and absolutely delighted that we managed to do it and get wins over 2 teams who we could potentially meet in the finals as well. So yeah, absolutely huge for us, and I think a massive confidence boost. A few weeks ago, our form was kind of up and down, but yeah, this just showed we are kind of the team that everyone thought we were. So yeah, fantastic.
I mean, you really do love to see it. I mean, if you didn't think the Nets could win the championship before this road trip, I mean, you certainly must be thinking about it now. And that was obviously without KD for all but one of the games, which is just absolutely insane when you think about it. I mean, there's a lot to be said kind of about the golfing class between the East and West. And I mean, a lot of it is justified because there is so much talent out West in the Western Conference. And I mean, the Nets went over there and embarrassed them, and that was without their best player. I mean, there was lots of factors that kind of went into the sweep, and I think obviously James Harden and Kyrie were absolutely superb. But I mean, the bench elevated their game so much that they have become an X factor for the Nets. And I mean, guys like Tyler Johnson, Landry Shamet, DJ, who has really elevated his game, and credit must go to him, have had such a good impact on the team. And I think just the team playing with a lot more confidence and effort which has been something that really kind of hasn't been there at times this year, has just given us that extra confidence to go into every single game thinking we can win it. And credit as well to Coach Nash and the rest of the staff, because some of the plays and the decisions that they've made over this road trip have been absolutely superb as well. And he's surely putting his name in the hat for Coach of the Year now.
Yeah, there's some rumblings about that, which I've seen, which is pretty cool. But I think you touched on it great there, Aidan, where it's, after trading Karis LeVert and Jarrett Allen, people are saying the Nets have got no depth. It's all about the star power, win now mode, all that kind of stuff. But our depth is back. I think it was Nets Daily in an article, I forgot which writer it was, but they were saying that the Nets bench has turned from a liability to an asset. And this is something we've kind of touched on over the last couple of weeks, really, where you people like Landry Shamet, Tyler Johnson, TLC, and DeAndre Jordan, like you say, have just been really, really good at just knowing their roles and getting in and performing when we need them. Even though sort of across the couple of games that we've had out West, we've had to be a little bit flexible, I want to say, or adaptable with the lineup, with people coming in now due to injuries and due to rest and things like that. But we've been able to maintain those wins, which is, what KD was saying, coming in and building those championship habits. I think that's the kind of thing he was talking about. It doesn't matter the bodies that are in there, really. As long as it's this same team performing to a high level, then that's what brings you into those opportunities, into those instances where you can perform at the highest level and hopefully, go far in the playoffs, maybe reach some finals and maybe bring back some silverware. But I thought I saw a really nice stat, which was during this 6-game winning streak, the Nets ranked number 20 in defensive rating. And again, that's without our best defender, which is KD. Obviously, I think we were hanging around bottom or 27th or something before that. And obviously, where 20th isn't the best, sort of pair that with our historic offense. It's something not to be sniffed at. So yeah, I think I'm gonna bust it out. This is for everyone watching a YouTube version of this show, but it's Scary Hours, baby. Got the T on, which is mint. So I love it. Really, really cool. And yeah, obviously we'll talk about the Dallas game a little bit more. It didn't really last on that far on, but yeah, really, really cool. talking about some other news from this week, James Harden got formally added as an All-Star reserve. I know we've spoken at length about All-Star game and what this might mean, but do you guys, it seems like a silly question, and I can think I'm probably going to know your answer, but well-deserved?
Completely justified. I mean, leading the Nets to finishing off a 6-0 West Coast road trip, winning the Eastern Conference Player of the Week, and then being announced as an NBA All-Star. Not a bad week at all for James Harden. And after, I mean, he definitely deserves to be an All-Star, and there's a huge argument there that he should be a starter in that team. But I mean, just to be an All-Star is fantastic. And yeah, he's definitely put his name in the hat for the MVP race. In the last few weeks, I think Woj described it absolutely perfectly last night on ESPN. I was watching their show before the game last night, and he said that the Nets signed James Harden as a luxury piece to add to the team, but he's now ended up becoming a necessity. And I think that was a really nice quote. I mean, because you summed up really well there, Matt. I mean, James Harden's had to adjust on a nightly basis, obviously due to KD being out, barring one of the games. Kyrie's been in and out with rest and kind of niggling injuries at times. And James Harden's absolutely flourished. I would go as far as saying he's definitely the most important player on the Nets, just because of how much they need to rely on him. And I mean, if you watch the games, he is box office every single night. And it's been an absolute pleasure watching him and getting to speak about him on this show.
Yeah, I mean, this is absolutely deserved. And I mean, it's some reserve to have when you consider kind of the other ones there. With all due respect to them, I think Harden is head and shoulders above many of the other All-Stars there. And obviously, they're all there for their own reasons. But yeah, I think, as Aidan rightly says, there's an argument for Harden to be a starter because he's been absolutely sensational since we've come in. When you consider the fact that he was meant to come in, it was meant to be scary hours all the time. They've barely actually played together since he came in. I think a lot of people kind of forget that we're still managing to get these results most of the time without KD, and most of the time without KD and Kyrie as well. So the fact that Harden's kind of come in and he's just kind of hit the ground running, he's got us winning, he's just putting up points and adapting, and yeah, it's absolutely fantastic. And I'm delighted that he's managed to get into the All-Star the reserves at least, and I'd imagine he'll probably be one of the first picked of the reserves.
Yeah, I think if you lead the league in assists and score 25 a night and almost a triple-double and do it on 50, 40, 90 nearly, you deserve to be an All-Star, probably an All-Star starter. So yeah, definitely deserved. But you touched on it there, Cammy. I've got some records since the Harden trade. Some of the Nets games have been played. So the Nets have gone 15-6 in games that Harden has played. When one of the big three plays, we're 1-2. When two of the big three play, we're 9-3. But when all three players play, we're 5-2. However, one of those two was the game that KD got pulled off early in Toronto. So really, that's 5-1. But I feel like I've got to formally apologize to James Harden. I was down on the trade initially. I didn't want him. I thought with all that shenanigans that was going on in Houston, he was a bad culture fit. I even went on Met the Criteria podcast and badmouthed him. But I honestly think this is a completely different James Harden than what we've seen for the last 9 years in Houston. So yeah, it's been absolutely crazy. This is obviously the first time I've really watched him close up, following the Nets as closely. I didn't watch him as closely, obviously, when he was in Houston. And yeah, he's just, if we can get him for a prolonged amount of time, I honestly think he's could put his name down as the best playmaker that ever played for the Nets. And that's, with Jason Kidd ahead of him, that's big talk. But some of the passes that he's throwing around to get to those 11 assists a game, he can pass the ball through the eye of a needle. And drop 25 on a step back three from 30 feet away. So he's box office. Have you seen the guns on him as well? He came in sort of pudgy and now he's like an absolute brick shithouse. So what NutriBullet sort of shakes or smoothies they've got him on in HSS, I would love to know. But yeah, a really deserving all-star reserve for me. Moving on to some other news. This one gave me a little bit of a headache because I've got this down in my notes as contract gymnastics. Basically, on Wednesday, the Nets waived Andre Roberson, Iman Shumpert, and Noah Vonleh before the deadline, basically just to make sure that they kind of got them off the books before their contracts would become guaranteed. And then yesterday, which was Saturday, sorry, they signed Roberson and Shumpert back on a 10-day contract, plus Tyler Cook, who's also on a 10-day contract. I checked in with Matt from NBA Call-Ups, who's kind of my go-to, who's got all eyes on all things G League. And I asked him kind of what we need to know about Tyler Cook. And he said he's kind of jumped on to the next level this season. Started out with a 31-point near triple-double. He's a versatile big that can do a bit of everything. He scored 20 plus points 5 times in 8 games and had 18 rebounds in one of those games. However, he has been playing on an 8-0 Wolves team. So what do you guys, I don't know if you've done any digging on Tyler Cook, or what do you guys think of retaining Roberson and Shumpert?
So we'll start with the kind of retaining Roberson and Shump. I mean, yeah, as you say, contract gymnastics, it was very confusing to see them in and out and in and out. And they could still leave in a matter of days' time. They could be away again, and it's a very, very confusing one. Obviously, I don't think anyone was really surprised seeing Noah Vonleh waived. He done virtually nothing in his kind of few minutes he did get on the court. We all know Roberson and Shump's kind of defensive ability, and obviously that's mainly why they were brought in, and we've kind of spoken about that in length in previous podcasts, and it'll be interesting to see. Some would maybe suggest they're fighting for the kind of same position in the kind of roster. The one who performs best will stay, get a guaranteed deal probably until the end of the season. Then the other one will get waived, and that'll kind of be that. As for Tyler Cook, obviously you've mentioned some of his G League stats, and that's highly promising. His kind of NBA numbers aren't quite as exciting as that, and you just like to hope that he's one of these players who can come in and maybe transform even half as much as that in, because if you're able to do that, I think it's fantastic. I think he's only 23 years old, and yeah, he's kind of one of those, you take a chance on him and he might turn out all right. If not, it's no real loss. But it'll be interesting to see, obviously, when he gets a bit of game time, how he kind of turns out. But certainly, it does look like there's a bit of a player in there given his G League performances.
I mean, as Steve Nash described it in his presser during this week, the Nets are staying flexible, and rightly so ahead of this buyout market, because this is probably the most important buyout market that the Nets have ever had. I mean, they've always been clever with these types of contracts. I mean, Sean Marks is an absolute magician when it comes to salary books. I know he's got probably a team that are kind of going through the team wages every single day and finding out what they can do. But yeah, he just seems to manage to do everything. And he's certainly kind of clever with what he does with these type of guys. I mean, it was announced at the same time, I think, when they announced the waivers for Shump and Andre Roberson, that they would be signing a 10-day with the team as soon as that became available. And I think they said that it was just giving the Nets flexibility in case that one of their buyout targets do become available. I mean, in terms of Tyler Cook, again, I've not seen much of the guy. Those stats are very impressive, which you mentioned there, Matt. So hopefully we can see some production there. From what I've heard, he's definitely been one of the better players in the G League at the moment. So he's more than deserving of a shot in the big league, and hopefully he can come in and do well. I think what will happen with Roberson and Shump is that I think it's likely that we'll keep one of them for the rest of the season. I'd say probably Roberson's probably the more likely, just from what we've seen on the court in the last few games, and then the other will be waived to make room for a buyout big, hopefully Andre Drummond, but we'll wait and see. But I've been impressed with Roberson since he came in. I think he's been solid and defensively at times. He just seems to be in the right place at the right times as well, and I think he looks ready anyway to be playing playoff minutes for this team, and I think he could give some good solid defensive minutes if they decide to keep him around. Yeah,
again, another one of those we'll have to wait and see. But yeah, like you say with Sean Marks, everyone else is playing checkers and he's playing chess, so he definitely knows what he's doing, and it's an age-old hashtag now, 5 years in, but in Marks we trust. So, we'll wait and see what happens with those two. But talking about contracts and in and out and who's going to get minutes, Spencer Dinwiddie has been in Nets news this week. Unfortunately, in and amongst trade rumours. Obviously, he's been out since the first week of the season with a partially torn ACL, I think it is. As we said last week, he's been in the gym. He's absolutely smashing his rehab. But reportedly, the Nets have been shopping him. Apparently, the Pistons have shown an interest in keeping him, in signing him. Talking purely out of my heart rather than my head, I would absolutely hate it if Spencer Dinwiddie got traded. What do you guys think of the trade rumors?
I mean, I absolutely love Spencer as well, and it is difficult to read stuff like that. But it is moments like this that you do need to remember that the Brooklyn Nets are a business, and they need to do what they can do to make the team as successful as possible, and that's it at the end of the day, unfortunately. From what we've heard, I mean, you can read the tea leaves with the news that has been announced, and you can assume that Spencer Dinwiddie actually wants to leave the team. Most likely, obviously, wanting a starting spot somewhere. He was obviously kind of seen some minutes for the Nets starting at the two next to Kyrie before Harden came in, but you've got to assume now that Harden's starting, that he probably won't find his way into that starting lineup again. And from what we've heard as well, there are plenty of teams around the league that are interested in signing him, and he would be a starter for those teams. I mean, if he doesn't want to re-sign, I mean, the Nets would be foolish not to move him before the deadline, because at the end of the day, they can get value for him instead of losing him for absolutely nothing. And I think Detroit were mentioned the other day. I know Orlando have always been a team that have been interested in Spencer Dinwiddie. It seems to be every other window that he seems to be mentioned with them, and I don't know if maybe that's something that they'd be interested in again. Personally, I can see a team like Orlando or Dallas being interested in Dinwiddie, and I think they'd be interested of the Nets as well to maybe pick up one of their bigs. But yeah, I've always loved Spencer, and I do wish him all the best. But it certainly sounds at the moment that he's played his last game for Brooklyn.
Yeah, I mean, I think you've got it spot on there, Aidan, and I think as we've said previously, Spence isn't exactly someone who's hidden his desire to move on as much as he's maybe committed to the team. The way he's kind of went about the whole contract thing, trying to Bitcoin it and all that kind of cryptocurrency and via Twitter, it's quite clear that he's already thinking of the next contract and thinking of that elsewhere to the Nets, because I think it's quite obvious, especially since Harden's come in, his Nets career's kind of done, and it's a shame when you consider it kind of ended in the way it did with the injury, and you think if he didn't get injured, would Harden have come in, would we have made that trade? I mean, personally, I think we would have. Would Spencer still been with the team? Probably not, because I think he would have probably been part of the trade had he not been injured, and that could have meant we would have kept someone else back. Maybe Jarrett Allen would have somehow stayed. But yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting. You've mentioned a few of the teams there. I think if it's a trade for Orlando, we've got to be looking for Aaron Gordon, who's always linked with us. And then when it comes to the Pistons, I mean, Jeremy Grant aside, there's not many players in that team who are jumping out at me going, yeah, I'd love to receive them in a trade. Like, I think there certainly needs to be some draft compensation there. Obviously, I think that would make a bit of sense. We're very kind of limited in terms of what I've got in terms of draft picks. So, yeah, that would make sense there. The Mavs is quite an interesting one as well, because during the broadcast last night, I'm sure they were maybe considering shopping Porzingis. Now, I don't think Porzingis would be possible for us. I think there's quite a difficult bit of money. I think he earns about 30-ish million a year. Might be just speaking nonsense there, but I do think it's in and around that region. But I think, yeah, I do possibly done there. It does seem like Dallas wanting to improve the team. So that might mean we can get someone. Obviously, Spence could then play with Luka Doncic, and we could get, as Aidan says, maybe one of their bigs. I'm not sure. Boban is maybe the answer, but I mean, he's big, he's tall, and I'm sure you pointed out a stat to us that seemed pretty mental, given the kind of lack of minutes he has. So might not be the worst shout, but I'd like to think, as Aidan said earlier on, Andre Drummond will be the man that we bring in to kind of fill that void at centre via the buyout market. But yeah, I think Spence is kind of days as a net are numbered, and maybe by next month he'll be away.
Yeah, it'll be a sad day in Nets world if and when that happens. But, you know, hey, maybe we'll bring Mason Plumlee back for a Brooklyn Nets reunion. But unfortunately, we'll have to wait and see. You know, obviously, the main thing is that he gets healthy and that he can come back on the court in whatever uniform it will be. But yeah, he's definitely served this team well. And yeah, just another chapter in what is a pretty crazy career story for Spencer Dinwiddie so far. That was all the off the court news that happened this week. We're going to go ahead now and dive into some game recaps. So starting off just mere hours before we recorded, we recorded last week's episode, we went on to have another incredible win on that West Coast road trip against the Clippers, winning 112-108. We were fresh off a win against the other LA team. The Nets were up by as many as 15 in this game. Gents, they say basketball's a game of runs. It was one of those good games for the neutrals with Kyrie, Harden, Kawhi Leonard, and Paul George all showing what they were made of. What did you guys make of the Clippers game?
This was a really, really good game. Perhaps one of my favourite of the season. I think the start that both Kyrie and Harden made was superb. They got 25 of our first 28 points in the first quarter, which was insane. And it was great that they did turn up, because I think the rest of the team certainly started really slow. As you said, Matt, we did lead by 15 at one point, and it did make things a wee bit kind of nail-bitey near the end when things got really close, but managed to see it out. A few highlights in this one. We were treated to a Kyrie dunk in the third, obviously there, a kind of collector's item, and yeah, that was quite nice to see. DJ, as we said a wee bit earlier on, he really turned up in this one. Perhaps his best game of the season, actually. 13 points, 11 rebounds, and 4 blocks. He just seemed to be like DJ again, and that's all you could really ask for. I think we've done really well against Kawhi and Paul George. Obviously, they've still got a fair amount of points, but they're superstar players. You can expect that to happen anyway. But yeah, I think a fantastic way to start off the week and also continue that run on the West. And yeah, fantastic, as we've said numerous times when we've faced the Clippers. It's a potential finals matchup. We've now beaten them twice this season. So yeah, absolutely delighted with how this one went.
Yeah, it must have been a really long week, because again, this game feels like it was absolutely ages ago, and I couldn't believe it when I was doing my notes for the pod this week that this game was actually this week. But yeah, no, you guys have both nailed it. I mean, like the first time the two teams met, some of the shooting on show was absolutely excellent. I mean, Kyrie and Harden combining for 65 points. They've just both been superb. Paul George, I was really impressed with him as well. He's really kind of improved his game, and he was absolutely on fire shooting. But yeah, once again, I mean, the Nets played really well defensively to go along with their obviously ever-present offensive power, which we know that if we can at least have 1 or 2 good quarters of defence, then we can go out and get the win on any night against any team. I was giving credit to DeAndre Jordan as well, Cammy. I love that extra effort from him. I mean, a really nice start line, and obviously had that superb kind of tip-in dagger with 11 seconds to go, which I think took everyone by a bit of surprise, because obviously Kyrie missed that shot, which he expected to go in, and then he just came out of nowhere to tip it in. I was really happy for him. And that type of start line, plus some average defense, is all we need from DeAndre Jordan. And I don't think we're asking for too much. But if he can put up numbers like that and defend at an average clip, then he can start in this team going into the playoffs. In terms of going on to obviously Patrick Beverley, what happened with him and Jeff Green, I mean, Patrick Beverley must be the cockiest player ever in the league to average 5 points. I mean, completely out of order for that hard hit on Jeff Green. It luckily looked much worse at the time than it actually was. I mean, I thought Jeff Green actually dislocated his shoulder or something like that. But then for Beverley to then go on to mock Green afterwards was just absolutely classless. And yeah, he's a good defensive player, but for me, he's not even one of those players where you would love him if he was on your team, though. He's not like that at all. I thought he was completely out of order, and he was very lucky to see him in the court after that.
Yeah, you guys have hit all my notes on this. I think just sort of carrying on from what you were saying about Patrick Beverley, like there's players like Trae Young who annoy you, and it's like, I kind of get what he's doing though, and he's kind of tiptoeing around the rules and using those to his advantage, and it's annoying, but it's just sort of one of those tactics that works, and you can kind of get the method to his madness. Whereas Patrick Beverley's, it was just mean, and that sounds really petty, but it was just like, for all the NBA athletes kind of saying it's a brotherhood and all this kind of stuff and camaraderie and all this kind of stuff, it's just like vindictive, aggressive, out to hurt people, shortening their careers, malicious sort of actions. And I think there's just no place for that. And like you say, with the mocking it afterwards, it put me in mind of, do you remember when KD got hurt in the finals and all the Toronto fans were like, yeah, because he just kind of hit the floor. As soon as they kind of, it dawned on them that it was serious, it was all a bit more somber. And when he got up, everyone kind of clapped him off the floor. Whereas this time there was that no remorse from, I know it was a completely different injury, but like there was just that no remorse from Pat Bev. And yeah, just a horrible move from him. It was a bit chirpy throughout the game. I saw Bruce Brown mouth off at Paul George as well, but this is a family show, so I won't repeat what he said. But yeah, so a real spicy game. DJ with that game winner was super sweet. Yeah, Kyrie showing some bunnies for a fast break. There's been a lot of chat in our UK Nets fans Discord about NBA Top Shot, which I'm not going to lie, I don't understand. But, you know, that's going to be, talk about a collector's item. That little clip is probably going to go for a little bit of cash, maybe, as an NBA Top Shot, maybe.
Before we go on, I've just remembered something from my notes. We were obviously talking about mocking from Pat Bev. There's someone that I cannot kind of miss out. Obviously, a few weeks ago, we had the referee calling us the New Jersey Nets and just being an all-round great guy. Now, a guy who really stood out to me in this match was, I'm not quite sure what it was, obviously a Clippers staff member of some sort. We were taking free throws and this boy was sitting on the chair just kind of right next to the basket going absolutely nuts all game, and he'd sit and clap and just make funny noises. And I don't know if he's picked that up, but it kind of made the early morning watching that a little bit easier. Just seeing this boy go.
You know who that was?
It was Steve Clifford,
Steve
Ballmer. It's Steve Ballmer, yeah.
Was it?
It's the owner. That's a guy with 86 billion in the bank going nuts like an absolute loon. It was absolutely mint. I loved it.
Do you think we can get Josiah doing that at some point? Do you think he would do that? I think he's too classy to do something like that.
He's too classy. We need to get Mr. Whammy back in the building, man.
You need to get Whammy back.
Giving it one of these. But yeah, so good. But yeah, Nets Republic shared that Brooklyn outscored LA 60 points to 38 points in the paint and committed only 6 turnovers to the Clippers 17, which, like, if you go back a couple of pods when the Nets were still kind of finding their feet shortly after the Harden trade, those were just stats that didn't happen, or they were complete opposite and reverse. So it's just really, really good to see, you know, the Nets kind of righting those wrongs, going forward as a team, and it translating into W's, which is awesome. And talking about W's, what a huge W, again, against the Kings on Tuesday night, winning 127 to 118. In fairness, the Kings were on a 7-game losing streak and we were on a 6-game winning streak. But it's exactly the kind of game we lost earlier in the season. What did you guys make of the Kings game?
Yeah, I mean, a really fun game. It was nice to get back to the slightly earlier tip-off time, being back in Brooklyn. But I spent the game, for the majority of the game, with a smile on my face, and a lot of that was down to one man, and it was Bruce Brown. I mean, Brown obviously had a career high of 29 points in the night, which he didn't even seem to realise until he saw it in the Jumbotron at the end of the game, which was just a perfect clip to sum off the night. It was great to see just almost like the NBA fan come out in Brown there, and the excitement, it was just really, really nice to see. And obviously the shimmy after the 3 in front of the Kings bench was nothing short of iconic as well. So that's probably going to be a gift for a very long time for us Nets fans. I mean, I almost didn't even kind of note this down for this one, but Harden picked up his 6th triple-double with the Nets, and it puts him in the 2nd in Nets all-time triple-doubles behind Jason Kidd, which is absolutely crazy considering he's only been here for a couple of months. But it's becoming the normal. It's almost like you don't talk about it because you almost expect it at times, which is absolutely crazy. And if you think how rare triple-doubles were for the Nets, for a while, I remember kind of D'Angelo Russell getting a triple-double and being like, oh my God, this is absolutely insane. This guy's doing it every other night, and it's just incredible to watch. I mean, obviously this one, we had the fans back in the Barclays Centre for this one, which was awesome to see. I mean, I couldn't be more jealous of them. I've seen quite a few people kind of almost not slating it, but kind of mocking it. You know, what's the point of having so little people there? Like, and why don't you just wait until get it full again? But have you heard what some of the players were saying afterwards? It means so much to them, to have fans in the crowd. And you've got to remember that some of these guys have never played in front of a Nets crowd while playing for the Brooklyn Nets. So I'm sure that was quite special for them. And hopefully this is one step closer to having a packed Barclays Centre. And fingers crossed, come playoffs time, we can get some good numbers in the house for those.
So you've also mentioned Bruce Brown and his kind of moments, so I'll not kind of discuss too much on that, but obviously I think that goes down as the most wholesome moment of the season, because it was just really lovely, just the sheer kind of disbelief that he'd actually done it. And I think that made it fantastic, because it kind of shows you how drilled in Brown is. Also, we know he describes himself as that kind of defensive dog. He's always given 120%. He's always the man running about. He's just been a complete pest all the time. And the fact that he didn't even know how many he'd scored was really good. Obviously, you'd maybe say that's a poor thing that a player can't even count how many buckets he's put in. But the fact that he managed to do that and just kind of keep on going, and I mean, if he's able to do that more often, that'll be fantastic. Obviously, not what he came to the team for. But yeah, fantastic that he's managed to kind of step up in yet another start. Someone who we did see for the first time this season, and for the first time in God knows how long, was Nicholas Claxton. Now, we also kind of discussed him last week and his kind of possible return, and he returned, got 13 minutes, and there wasn't too much to note. He did kind of get on the end of a Harden lob, and there was quite an interesting video that Matt Brooks put out on his YouTube channel kind of in the days after the game, and just kind of discussing Clax, Roberson and Shump. And yeah, the Clax bit was really interesting to me, because as an NBA fan who's not too dialed in with all the kind of tactics and all the different kind of moves, I'll know the basic stuff, but Matt kind of broke it down in such a simple term, like in a simple way. And yeah, so the kind of video shows Clax's defensive versatility, lots of different switches. He seems capable of kind of defending 1 through 5, given his height, and he's rapid as well. So that kind of lets him rush about. Also showed off his kind of rim protection, his ability to kind of take the ball at the kind of top of the 3-point line. And I can't remember the kind of name of the play, but I mean, it looks certainly interesting. It's something that DJ certainly doesn't offer us. And yeah, I think the early signs for someone who's been out for a while are certainly good. Obviously, we'll speak a little bit more about him as the games go on, but it looks like a player who can certainly make an impact for us with regards to the kind of whole game. As Aidan says, as exciting as it was, I couldn't help but feel a little bit worried. There was times the game was a little too close, and it just seemed like when he said earlier on in the season we would have lost this, but then kind of in the final few minutes, was a scoring flurry. It made it look quite comfortable in the end, but yeah, certainly made it a lot better kind of near the end. But there were a few kind of shaky moments for me. But yeah, delighted that we managed to return with fans and obviously get the win as well.
Yeah, that's exactly what I've got on. It's just another one of those games where we started well, finished well, but we just let it get a bit closer than it should have been in those second and third quarters. Yeah, I've got in my notes, I've got a return of the Clax. Again, look really good with our kind of switchy defense. Looks like he can defend multiple positions. Super, super quick on his feet. He kept up with De'Aaron Fox at times, which I think he's kind of really one of the quicker players in the game. So if he can keep up with the Fox, then that bodes pretty well. And something we've needed from our bigs for a long time. But yeah, like as you guys have said, that Bruce Brown video, him saying, I got 29, and like just super, super pleased with himself, chatting to Jeff Green, was just super, super wholesome content. And yeah, really, really what you want to see from this Nets team. So that leads us on to Thursday for another win against the Orlando Magic. I say it was a win, 129-92, an absolute blowout. I've not dug much into individual performances because I think we're going to run out of superlatives soon, the way that our superstars have been playing. But yeah, lads, what do you think about the absolute atrocity that we caused in Orlando against that Magic team?
I mean, given the way the game started, I most definitely didn't expect the game to end with us winning by, well, as much as we did. It was absolutely terrible. The first 6 minutes, we got 6 points, and yeah, I think we were hitting around 35% kind of from the field. Did improve drastically as the game went on, but yeah, very, very slow kind of start. And thankfully, it didn't cost us like it maybe would have cost other teams. A stat that kind of came up on the screen during the game that absolutely blew my mind was Harden has become the first net to average 20 points and 10 assists in a 20-game span in franchise history. He's only played 21 games. Like, it is absolutely mental. So yeah, that's obviously a fantastic stat that came up. They had a spell kind of in the third where they started cutting into the deficit, but we managed to kind of weather that storm, see it out, and yeah, just kind of kept the foot on the gas, which I quite liked. We kind of already developed a big lead, and yeah, we could have quite easily taken the foot off the gas, but yeah, we just kept going and going and going, and yeah, I think that was fantastic to see. A lot of teams would have probably just let up, but I think there was a lot of players fighting for the positions, trying to show, right, I need to get myself up the rotation. I've got to go for it whilst we're blowing a team out. So yeah, that was obviously fantastic to see. We did see more of Nicholas Claxton, and he had the dunk near the end of the third, and this was an absolutely mental dunk. Obviously, a really lovely pass from Harden to begin with, but yeah, Clax's dunk was perhaps the highlight of the night, and was really impressed by him again. Obviously, after just playing for the first time in the best part of a year, a few nights before, he kind of stepped up again. Still got a little bit to go. Would still like to see more from him, but things are certainly looking very good. We did see a debut for Tyler Cook in this one, and it was screen after screen after screen after screen, and he did nothing else. He just screened. So, I mean, in terms of screening, they worked. But yeah, I think he certainly needs to be offering a lot more to the team if he wants to be staying on the roster. But yeah, other than kind of the poor start, enjoyed the match overall, and obviously got to continue that fantastic winning run that we'd built.
Yeah, I mean, Bruce Brown made me smile on Tuesday, and Nick Claxton made me smile on Thursday. I mean, we talked about it a couple of weeks ago, whether we should be as hyped as everyone else about Nick Claxton. I don't think I was as hyped for this guy as I probably should have been. What an impact this guy had in the court, and I think he's going to be the next secret weapon for the Nets for the rest of the season. I think Theo in our Discord mentioned that he would like to see Claxton starting in the playoffs for the Nets, and it could well happen. He's that type of player that he could provide a real impact for the team, and I loved his defensive effort. I mean, he talked in an interview not too long ago, basically saying, "Yeah, I defend KD in training." That's basically what he does. That's the only person he defends is KD. And I mean, for a guy in his sophomore year, there's no better way to learn how to defend than guarding Kevin Durant. And in this one, he had 4 steals, 2 blocks, and yeah, just incredible numbers for someone who's really just kind of starting out in the league and has had a lot of injury problems. But yeah, you kind of summed it up, Cammy, with the way the Nets started this one was really poor, and it felt like it was going to be a really long night. But somehow the Nets, only scored like 6 points in the first 6 minutes of the game, and still managed to get 129 points in the game, which is just absolutely incredible. And I never would have predicted that after the way the first quarter went. Yeah, I mean, in terms of picking out a specific stat on this one, the bench plus minus numbers were absolutely crazy. I mean, Shamit was plus 30, TLC plus 23, TJ plus 21, and Clax plus 16, sorry. And I mean, I'm no expert in plus minus, and I'm not going to pretend that I am, but I know that that's really good. And yeah, it's, again, I'm loving seeing the bench coming up with the production that we have needed at times. Yeah, I mean, it was a complete blowout, and Orlando aren't a good team that are plagued with lots of injuries, and they don't have much talent there at the moment. But if you go back the last few years and you see how difficult Orlando have made life for the Nets at times, they've put some really good games against the Nets. Vucevic has killed us over the years. So it's nice to see this as kind of a marker on how far the Nets have come. And how good we are now that we can go into games against teams like Orlando and expect to blow them out every time.
Yeah, they've definitely been a banana skin team not even a banana skin team, because they've just been a really, really close sort of team in terms of ability and expectations and stuff for the last couple of seasons. And they've tended to have our number. I remember when we were initially talking about Aaron Gordon trades and stuff like that, we always said that he kind of had really good nights against the Nets on those Magic teams. So yeah, it's always a little bit sweeter to take the ones that are against teams that normally kind of edge you. So that was nice to see. However, obviously we can't overstate how absolutely decimated they've been by injury. But yeah, you guys have said Claxton showed out. He's a guy that does not suffer from modesty, which I think is great. He kind of says, like, I haven't even scratched the surface of what I'm capable of, or words to that effect, which I absolutely love. So yeah, hopefully lots more things to see from him. Just a couple of stats on the win. It was the third biggest win in Barclays Centre history, winning by 37 points. The Nets have now scored 120 or more points for the 20th time this season. We've only played 34 games. And the Nets' 41 points in the second quarter is the 10th quarter this season by scoring 40 or more. So yeah, offense isn't a problem. Well, the Nets offense is a problem, but for other teams. So yeah, it was a really, really good performance. As you guys said, started off slow, but, led by as many as 40. And yeah, managed to take it home. Really, really good. But then we had a few days off. So we went on to Saturday. And unfortunately, it didn't hurt as much as the Joe Harris 3-point streak ending did, but unfortunately, all good things must come to an end. And we did suffer a loss to the Dallas Mavericks, 98-115, snapping the Nets' longest win streak in 14 years. What did you guys make of the Mavs game?
Well, obviously, Kyrie was listed out for this one due to injury recovery, aka load management, aka they rested him. And I'm not going to lie, I was really disappointed that the Nets rested Kyrie for this one. I just found that their timing for giving him a bit of a break was a bit strange for two reasons. They could have rested him for that Magic game, and let's face it, we probably would have still won. And then that would have given him like 3 days off or so before playing the Mavs. And again, we're so close to the All-Star break. He's going to be playing in the game, but he's still going to get a ton of time off. He's only going to be really kind of involved for 1 day. Why are they resting him now? But I wasn't disappointed in the loss too much. We know the Mavs are a tough team even when you're with your best players, but I think I'm more disappointed about the streak ending, purely because I don't think you can underestimate how much confidence comes with that winning streak. You go into these games and you do expect to win it, but there wasn't really a time last night where I felt like we were going to win the game. It was kind of one of those where the Nets kind of could never really put enough together to get into the lead. They would have some nice runs. Harden got hot a few times. Joe Harris kind of was the main option going into the second quarter, and he was doing well at one point. But then Dallas would go down the other end, hit 2 or 3 threes, and just absolutely kill the momentum. There was a few kind of really strange, poor performances from the Nets. TLC was one of those guys who picked up a few extra minutes, so fair enough, but he ended up shooting 9 threes, and a guy like TLC shouldn't be shooting 9 threes on any night for the Nets. And I think he went 2 of 9, and it was probably one of his poorer games that he's had for the team. But yeah, you can't get too caught up in the game itself. It's one of those where you can't really expect the Nets to get too much from. We obviously done it against the Suns, but I didn't expect us to do it again against the Mavs, and definitely on to the next one, because I'll be looking to probably forget this one as quick as possible.
I'm disappointed and I'm not disappointed at the same time. Disappointed obviously because the streak ended, but not too disappointed because I didn't really feel like we deserved to win the game. As Aidan said, at any point, we never really kind of took the game by the horns. We kind of made a bit of a slow start and Dallas kind of rushed away. We did manage to then catch up, but we'd no sooner done that and we went into free fall again. We're 10 points behind or whatever, and then kind of caught up. And yeah, just kind of seemed to be the theme of the night. And kind of, I think the stat that was on the NBA report was that we trailed by at least 10 points for the remaining 18 points of the game, which was mental. And obviously, you're never going to win games when that's the case. And yeah, just a really poor night. I think Harden was excellent in keeping us kind of in touch in the first kind of half. 25 points in that first half, and yeah, just completely fell off in the second half. Only 4 points in that second half, and you can't help but think, well, I'm saying can't help but think if we did replicate that first half performance, we'd have won the game by a few points. And obviously, you can't expect it to be Harden stepping up every night. And I'm not blaming him because, let's be honest, he scored 29 points, and without him, things would have been a lot worse. We just didn't seem to get going. Obviously, streaks aren't always going to last forever. It was fantastic while it lasted, and I think the most important thing now is just being able to get over it. It's happened. Let's now focus on the kind of games this week. And another interesting thing, kind of going back to the game, was the starting lineup. Obviously, not not starting kind of DeAndre Jordan. This one was a bit of a strange one, and yeah, bit of a strange lineup. Whether DJ starting would have made a difference, I'm not all that sure. But yeah, disappointing in the sense that the streak's over, but I don't think it was a game we really deserved to win.
Yeah, I agree with you both. Just one of those games where it's a bit deflating because there's no excuses for that. Like, it was just sort of really, like, sort of Jeff Green put it perfectly after the game. He said, this is a no excuse team. If you're on the floor, you are going to play as hard as you can. They just got the best of us tonight and they got the win. That's all it really was. It's not about us running out of gas. We just didn't come ready to play and they won. It's one of them. It's like, you kind of, normally when a team capitulates or like you say, TLC missing his threes, there's something you can hang your hat on about why we kind of lost the game. But I think it was just one of those nights that you're going to get, like you say, and we were just kind of beaten by the better team. I was actually speaking to Liam Horsley from Hardwood Hoops podcast, who's the only Mavs fan I know. And obviously the Mavs have been on a bit of an up and down season. And I was wondering, what Mavs team can we expect? How come it's been a bit of a rocky season? And he was kind of saying that their kind of around the rim defense isn't ideal, but he said of us, it's not a very big issue against this Nets team apart from Harden. So, like going back to what you were saying, Cammy, about, not having a traditional big in there from the start is maybe a bit weird, but, it's just one of those things. In terms of the game, ultimately, it was one of those ones, it was probably too many turnovers. And that was, again, something after the game James Harden kind of took on his own back, which, like you say, for a guy that scored 29 points and kind of got it as close as it was, is a bit strange for him to kind of take all the responsibility for the loss on his shoulders as well. But, that's nice to see from a bit of a leader. But yeah, just one of those, and we'll have to go on to next week and hopefully get back in that W column. But fortunately, the one good thing that came out of Saturday night was that Philly also lost, so we're still only half a game, back from that number one seed in the East. So looking ahead to next week, we start off with a trip to Texas. On Monday, we head up to San Antonio for a game against the Spurs before going to James Harden's old stomping ground on Wednesday for a game against the Rockets. After that, it's the All-Star break, so we'll tackle that next week. But gentlemen, what do you guys think of the week ahead?
And it's quite an interesting week ahead, and one that I think that we ought to sweep. San Antonio Spurs are also a team with some very good players: DeJounte Murray, Lonnie Walker, DeMar DeRozan, and obviously have one of the greatest coaches in all time with Greg Popovich at the helm. So yeah, certainly won't be an easy one, but given they are above 500 at time of recording, given our record against above 500 teams this season being near enough perfect, it would suggest to me that we'll get a win, but we certainly can't take them lightly. They've beaten the Lakers, Jazz and Clippers, who occupy the top three spots in the West at the moment, so there's certainly no mugs, but I'd like to think we've got more than enough to get past them. As for the Rockets on Wednesday night, if we don't win this, there's something terribly wrong, because as good as some of the individual players in this Rockets team are, John Wall, Christian Wood's obviously come into a game, they're on a losing streak of 10 games, and yeah, we've got to be piling on the misery. Obviously, James Harden's going to be returning to his old stomping ground. I'm expecting him to kind of step up and really make an impact on this game. And yeah, I think that this should be an easy 2-0 week for us.
Yeah, I just got a notification through my phone to say that Kyrie will be playing tomorrow night, which is great to see. I mean, we expected that, obviously, with just a game to rest. And so hopefully we shouldn't have too many issues here. Yeah, I see us going 2-0 on these two as well. We shouldn't have too many issues. I mean, the Spurs are playing much better than expected, I'd say. They're always a tough team. Any Greg Popovich team is a tough game, but it should be winnable. In terms of the Rockets game, yeah, they've lost 10 in a row and they're playing absolutely awful. I've seen quite a few people actually putting PJ Tucker in trade rumours with Spencer Dinwiddie, and they've clearly not watched the Rockets much this year, because PJ Tucker doesn't look like a good half the player he once was, and he's really shown his age. So that's not something I'd be interested in. But yeah, it should be really interesting. Obviously, Harden playing against the Rockets, he'll bring a little extra on Wednesday just for playing against his old team, which should be fun to watch. I think it's really important for the Nets to get these 2 wins before the All-Star break, because that'll obviously put us at 10-1 in the final 11 games before the break. And obviously that'll swing momentum in our favour, and may even see the Nets go into the first seed by the All-Star break, which should be absolutely fantastic, and it would put us in a good steadings for the rest of the season. So yeah, I'd like to see us win both of these ones.
Yeah, I think I'm with you guys. Short and sweet. I think these are 2 definitely winnable games, especially that Rockets game. I think I saw a tweet or a stat there where the Rockets are the only team that James Harden hasn't scored 40 against or something over the years. So that would be a nice opportunity to kind of tick off all the 30 teams in the NBA. But yeah, let's speak it into existence, lads. 2-0 in this coming week. Couple of wins going into All-Star. And that'll just propel us into the second half of the season, and hopefully deep into the playoffs and, and beyond. But that'll do us for today. Thanks so much for listening along, watching along on YouTube. Hope you enjoyed this week of BK to UK. Make sure you check us out on all the socials. We've got a Teespring store where you can buy merch. We've got a new email newsletter that you can subscribe to get all the most interesting net stories from the week that's just passed straight into your inbox. All the information on where to find that is on our Twitter. So if you search us at UK Nets Fans, you can follow all the links in our bio. And yeah, thank you very much, and we'll see you next week.